The building was nearly silent when I pulled into the underground lot, the kind of silence that made every echo of my heels sound sharper than it should. It was close to 8:00 p.m., long past the hour I usually shut down the day with tea and quiet reading at home. But tonight I had left the quarterly finance folder on my desk, and until it was back in my possession, I knew my mind would not rest. The air inside the office suite smelled faintly of printer ink and lemon polish, the familiar scent of routine. My office was tucked behind walnut doors at the far end of the hall, and I was halfway there when I froze. Voices drifted through the corridor, familiar, intimate, and unmistakably my son's. "She's too old. It's time we move her out." Linnell said, his voice smooth as if rehearsed. Mateo's answer came softer, hesitant. "It's not easy, but we can't keep doing things her way. The market's changing." I stopped breathing. Through a sliver in the open door, I saw them, my sons, in my office, joined by Elisa, their longtime advisor. She crossed one leg over the other, her tablet balanced as she spoke with icy precision. "She's the face of a past era. We need a cleaner aesthetic, younger consultants, new architecture. A rebrand will make the shift easier if she steps aside gracefully." I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. My body suddenly foreign, both heavy and weightless. Their words weren't just about strategy. They were about me. About replacing me. About erasing me. I backed away, my heels muffled against the carpet, until I reached the elevator. The reflection staring back at me in the mirrored doors looked like a stranger, eyes wide, but unreadable, shoulders stiff. By the time the doors closed, my breath still hadn't returned. Outside, the night air cut sharper than usual. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, watching the office lights fade floor by floor, while my sons continued plotting upstairs. They thought they were securing the company's future. But all I heard was betrayal, deliberate and cold. And sitting there in the stillness, memories came uninvited me at 28, standing in the heat outside my first makeshift yard in Chula Vista. Cement bags stacked against a plywood wall, a toddler on my back, another sleeping under a tarp. I had bribed city inspectors with tamales and wore concrete dust in my lungs like armor. No loans, no lifelines, just grit. I built that company with my own hands, and my sons had grown up in its shadow, eating dinners on job sites and sweeping floors alongside the crew. I gave them more than childhood, I gave them a legacy. And now, they were trying to take it from me. The next morning, the betrayal became undeniable. While grinding coffee beans at 7:00 a.m., my phone buzzed. No greeting, no tenderness. Just a message from Linnell. "We need to talk about your future. Come to the office tomorrow at 10:00 a.m. Legal documents will be ready." Cold, final. I stared at it, the weight heavier than it should have been. But instead of tears, a kind of precision set in. I dressed as I always did, pressed shirt, gray trousers, hair pulled back, and went to work. The office had changed overnight. Nods from employees looked the same, but carried a shadow beneath them. Elisa passed me in the hall, her smile sharp like a realtor eyeing a house about to be staged. In my office, I sat before the framed photo of our first completed project, my boys ages 5 and 10, holding a sign that read, "My mom builds big things." My throat tightened, but my resolve hardened. They thought they had a transition plan. What they didn't know was that I had already begun writing my own. That evening, after the house fell into silence, I stood before the bathroom mirror and studied the woman I had become. Silver hair pinned back, spine unbent, shoulders square. This wasn't grief. It was clarity. I poured a small glass of wine, the kind I saved for contract closings, and made 2 calls. The first was to Anna, my trusted accountant, who agreed to meet me the following evening. The second was to a man I hadn't spoken to in years, Jorge Manzano, my fiercest competitor. "I believe we may have business to discuss," I said in the message I left. Anna arrived the next night with her calm professionalism and quiet loyalty. Over coffee, I told her plainly I wanted out. I wanted to sell my majority share. She asked the name before I even finished. To Jorge, she said, her brow lifting slightly. I nodded. She understood. When my sons and Elisa arrived at our scheduled meeting the next morning, they came with polished folders and a young lawyer in tow. They had prepared a graceful exit for me, an honorary title, a pension of farewell video. Their words were elegant, designed to soothe. But to me, they felt sterile, surgical, already decided. I let them finish, then closed the folder with a calm smile. I need a week to think I told them. Relief flickered across their faces, and they left certain they had won. But as they rehearsed their coup, I was already setting the terms of my departure on my timeline on my terms. Jorge chose the same cafe booth. He always had a corner seat worn smooth by years of negotiations. He stood when I approached, offered his steady handshake, and waited until the server left before speaking. I thought you retired from trying to outbid me, he said with a faint smile. I didn't come to bid, I replied, sliding into the booth across from him. I came to sell. He leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly, the way they always did when calculating angles. I laid it out in simple terms: 60% ownership, full majority control. No conditions, a clean and immediate transfer. Jorge's eyebrows lifted, but he didn't waste time with disbelief. He didn't insult me with low offers either. He simply nodded, understanding the weight of what I was putting on the table. You're walking away from your own company, he said. No, I answered. I'm walking away before it's taken from me. We negotiated with the efficiency of veterans. 2 espressos, sharp numbers, and an unspoken respect that had been forged over decades of circling the same contracts. He agreed to wire 1/3 of the sum that day, the remainder upon the legal transfer. It was clean, fast, confidential, the exact opposite of the betrayal I had heard through that office door. Back home, Anna was already waiting with folders spread across my kitchen table. Her hands moved swiftly through contracts, tax pathways, and board notifications, her calm demeanor steadying me like an anchor. They'll be furious, she murmured at one point, eyes fixed on the numbers. I know, I replied. Let them be. By the 3rd day, the transfer was complete. Jorge now held the majority. The ink was dry, the funds cleared, and every legal document sealed and filed. I hadn't felt regret for even a moment. My sons had mistaken my silence for submission, but silence had always been my sharpest tool. The meeting they had requested went forward as scheduled. At 10:00 a.m., sharp, they arrived. Linnell in his most commanding charcoal suit, Elisa in silk, and Mateo trailing quietly, as if unsure of the air he was breathing. I had the conference room prepared, coffee waiting lights dimmed just enough to soften the edge. I stood at the head of the table where I had always sat and gestured for them to take their places. Linnell folded his hands, his tone clipped but expectant. We're glad you've had time to think everything over. We hope. I've made a decision, I cut in. My voice was calm, measured. As of yesterday afternoon, I sold my 60% stake in the company. The silence was immediate, pressing. Mateo blinked, confused. Elisa's lips parted, her fingers curling around the folder she had brought. Linnell's face tightened, the color draining as he tried to absorb the words. To who, he demanded. To Jorge Manzano, I said evenly. He is now the majority owner. Effective immediately. You can't do this, Linnell snapped, his composure cracking. I already did, I replied. Elisa was quicker to recover, though her voice came low and sharp. Why him? Because he respects what this company is, I answered, and he didn't ask me to disappear quietly. Then I delivered the final blow. Whether or not you stay in this business is no longer my decision. That is up to Jorge now. He may keep you or not. The silence that followed was thicker than any argument. Matteo leaned back, rubbing his jaw, unable to meet my eyes. Elisa's stare dropped to the table, her confidence flickering. Linnell looked at me with something between fury and betrayal, as if I had burned the inheritance he believed was already his. "You handed our legacy to a competitor," he said finally. "No," I corrected. "I handed it to someone who never forgot how I built it." I gathered my notes with deliberate calm, unhurried, while they sat frozen in their seats. "You are no longer heirs. You're employees. And employees answer to ownership." I walked to the door. None of them moved to stop me. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed. A message from Jorge: transfer complete. Staff informed. Congratulations. I stepped outside into the sharp morning air and let the wind carry away the last weight pressing on my chest. 2 weeks later, I closed on a small cottage tucked behind seagrass and weathered dunes south of Oceanside. Its paint was chipped, its mailbox crooked, but it faced the ocean and smelled of salt and thyme. I brought only what mattered: a few books, my gardening gloves, a worn coffee mug from the company's earliest days. The rest I left behind. The days came slowly at first, uncoiling from decades wound tight. I woke when I wanted, walked barefoot on the patio, pulled weeds without urgency. My hands remembered labor, but my mind no longer raced with agendas or board schedules. I slept through the night for the first time in years. Freedom was quieter than I expected, and infinitely more complete. Luna came most weekends, her presence like sunlight slipping through the cracks of a long-closed window. She would arrive with wind-tangled hair and a sketchbook tucked under her arm, dropping her backpack on the porch before curling up beside me. She never asked about the company, never tried to pry into wounds she already sensed ran deep. Instead, she brought questions that belonged to her own future, the kind of questions 17-year-olds ask when they are both impatient and afraid of the world. One evening, she sketched while I sipped tea, the ocean breathing steadily in the background. "Grandma," she asked softly, "aren't you lonely here?" Her eyes lifted from the page, wide and honest. I thought about it for a moment, letting the silence stretch between us. The horizon was painted in pinks and golds, the sea meeting sky without hesitation. "Being alone isn't the same as being hollow," I told her. "I have myself, and that's finally enough." She smiled, her face softening, as if the words landed deeper than I intended. Then she turned her sketchbook toward me. On the page was a drawing of a modest building with tall glass windows and ivy creeping up one side. "It's a community library," she explained. "I want to build places where people feel safe. Like you built your company." I studied her, drawing her voice, her determination. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something lift in my chest. I had not failed to pass on a legacy, it had simply taken root in a different form. My sons saw only profit and transition plans, but Luna saw shelter, safety, purpose. She saw what I had once carried alone now sprouting in her. As summer deepened, I learned the rhythm of my new life. Mornings were slow, the sun warming my porch, while I drank coffee from that old, fading company mug. Afternoons I spent in the small garden I planted along the fence, coaxing tomatoes and basil from the sandy soil. At night, I read novels I had promised myself I would someday finish, turning pages without thinking about deadlines or invoices. The phone still rang, of course. Calls from old colleagues, whispers of confusion spreading through the industry after the sudden sale. Some asked why. Some asked if I was forced. Most wanted to know if I regretted it. My answer never wavered. No. I had built something that lasted longer than anyone believed it would. And when the people I built it for tried to discard me, I left on my own terms. That I told them was enough. But not all voices were from the past. One afternoon, Matteo called. His voice carried hesitation, the kind of weight that comes when a son wants to say more than he can. "Mama," he began, then stopped, as though the word itself felt unfamiliar. I just wanted to check if you're okay. I paused, listening to the tremor beneath his words. Matteo had always been the quieter one, less ambitious than his brother, more prone to reflection. For a moment, I almost softened. Almost. I'm more than okay, I said, steady. I'm free. He exhaled, but whatever he wanted to confess never came. We hung up soon after, the silence between us heavier than any argument. Elisa, I knew, would never reach out. She had built her identity on sharp edges and ambition, and she would never admit miscalculation. Linnell, on the other hand, sent one message weeks later. You betrayed us. I read it once, then deleted it. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I chose the company of the ocean, the soft murmur of waves replacing boardroom debates. Some evenings, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, staring at the horizon until stars pricked the sky. And every so often, I let myself remember the younger version of me hauling cement, bribing inspectors, rocking a child to sleep while signing contracts. That woman had carried the weight of 3 lives at once, and she had done it without apology. Now, for the first time, she could rest. Autumn came slowly along the coast, the mornings sharper, the evenings cloaked in earlier shadows. I had fallen into a rhythm that no longer required alarm schedules or meetings, yet I remained disciplined in my own quiet way. I rose with the light brewed coffee in the chipped mug from our first project and walked along the sand where the tide erased footprints before I had taken 20 steps. Each day was unremarkable on the surface, yet every day felt like a victory over the years I had spent bound to obligations that no longer held meaning. The company's news reached me in fragments carried by whispers through old friends, and the occasional article I refused to read in full. Jorge had moved swiftly, as I knew he would. He had consolidated leadership, shifted contracts, trimmed unnecessary expenses, and most importantly, made decisions without sentiment. The staff adapted, some grumbling at first, but in time, most fell into line. My son's roles, however, were less certain. Matteo remained working quietly, avoiding attention. Linnell, I heard, clashed with Jorge, openly trying to assert authority that no longer belonged to him. Elisa's influence waned, though I had no doubt she sharpened her plans in silence. None of it surprised me. The company was no longer mine, and I had no desire to interfere. One evening, as I trimmed dead leaves from the basil in my garden, Anna stopped by with a bottle of wine. We sat on the porch, listening to the ocean hum against the shore. She lifted her glass and said simply, "You did the right thing, Irene. Most people don't know when to step away." I didn't step away, I corrected gently. I was pushed. I just chose where I landed. She smiled at that, a rare, genuine smile. And you landed better than anyone expected. It struck me then how few people truly understood what I had given up or what I had gained. The world would see only that I had relinquished control, surrendered a company I had built from grit and sweat. But what they didn't see was the deeper truth that freedom, at least for me, was worth more than legacy. Luna continued to visit her sketchbooks, filling with drawings of imagined places, libraries, park shelters. Her vision was unpolished, but her passion undeniable. I watched her work and realized that what I had built was not meant to be inherited like property. It was meant to inspire, to prove that persistence could carve something solid from nothing. Perhaps my sons couldn't see it, but Luna did, and that was enough. One late afternoon, we sat on the porch as the sky burned orange. Luna leaned her head against my shoulder. "Do you ever wish you'd fought harder to keep it?" she asked quietly. I took a long breath, letting the salt air fill my lungs. Fighting would have meant staying in their game, playing by their rules. Sometimes the only way to win is to walk away before they write the ending for you. She nodded as though she were etching the words into her memory. Then she showed me another sketch, a community center with wide open doors and children spilling out onto a courtyard. This one's not a library, she explained. It's a place where people can gather, learn, feel safe. I want to make spaces where people can breathe. I looked at her, my granddaughter, with fire in her heart, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Not for myself, but for what came next. That night, after she left, I sat alone beneath the porch light with a cup of tea. The waves whispered against the shore, steady and endless. I thought about the years I had given to the company, about the betrayals and the battles, about the strength it had taken to let go. And I realized that what mattered most was not what I lost, nor even what I built. It was the lesson that remained, that no one, not even your own blood, can define your worth. Life had taught me that loyalty is fragile, but resilience is a fortress no one can take from you. So I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the night carry me into peace, knowing that my story was not an ending, but a passing of the torch. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the strength hidden inside ordinary lives. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below about what loyalty and resilience mean to you.